Welcome, Ben. So glad you're here. You're working on this amazing radio show on Slim Radio called Radiant Resistance.
That's right.
And you just started the new Anthology, which is a project connecting Dutch, American, colonial histories. We'll be talking more about that later. But yeah, who are you and why are you doing this show?
I'd say I'll answer why I'm doing the show first, because I'll stall that a bit. But I'm doing the show because I think when we come to talk about marginalized people's identities, specifically Black people's identities, we were always talking about the trauma. We always talk about, I mean, if it's spoken about, what you hear is the traumatic elements. I'm not saying that is spoken about enough either, but I just feel like there's so much more to be said about it. We just start thinking of ourselves as like the experiencers of trauma or these negative things, when there's this whole other side where you can experience happiness and joy as well. And that, I think when you really start expressing that, like, here's one example. So I spoke to someone about this, and she was also saying that in some ways it's like having your own little in-group, that you have your own ways of speaking. Like, let's say she was Kenyan, so she's speaking Swahili with her friends. And then people around her here were just like, they didn't understand. So for once, it's like you're not on the out group. It's like you're creating your own in-group to some extent, but really it's about celebrating yourself and doing it unapologetically. It's not about really creating those divisions, but really just celebrating yourself as much as you can and your community. Honestly, I'm just someone who's interested in storytelling in whatever way can do that. Like, I just still learning how to do it, like, for sure. Like, and it's not always like, once upon a time this happened. It's often just trying to bring people together, or bringing friends together, or like cooking different foods. Like, there's so many stories in food. Like, I could go on and on about that. Trust me, I really could. But yeah, I'd say I'm just someone who's really passionate about telling these stories and bringing people together and, expressing what I think is important.
What is Black joy, and how do you go about translating that into a podcast?
That's a really good question.
Or not even a podcast, a show. Yeah. Or anything. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny you asked me that, because that's usually one of the first questions I ask my guests on the show. What is Black joy to you? It's not easy to answer, because this is sort of borrowing a concept one of my guests had. Michael is this wonderful professor. And he said that when we talk about Black joy, we have to be careful not to essentialize all these experiences. And essentializing something really means defining somebody through a particular experience, and then using that experience to define an entire group of people. And so you have to be kind of careful when you talk about that. That's something I'm still learning in terms of how we talk about when we experience happiness and the things that bring us joy. But for me, I would have to say, maybe I just like to talk too much, because the first thing that came to mind was having a voice. To me, that's joy. It's either speaking, doing some poetry, and overall representing yourself, representing your people, and trying to connect and communicate and really express yourself. That's where I really get a lot of joy, personally. And when in the context of Blackness, I think that's because when I was younger, I had quite a lot of trauma surrounding that. Like, it wasn't something I felt really. The only times I really thought about it was when it came up in a negative sense. Like, when someone said something racist, or when I was reading all these books about slavery, which everyone should do, but then you only really get one side of the story. And with this podcast, or with this radio show, I really just wanted to lean into the opposite side, to give the full view. And I'm not even talking about giving this full view to other people, not giving this full view to even a white audience. It's really about reminding, in part, maybe it's egotistical, but reminding myself of it, and then hopefully bringing other people along for the ride. And if I could do that even a little bit, even just like if 1% of that does something, I mean, then I'm happy with that. Yeah.
You described it a bit also in the introductions in the radio show as a form of protest, but also a form of anti-racism. But you're also exploring how it comes about in romance and friendship and music. Obviously, it's a radio show. You're sharing music as well. I listened to the Hamilton clip.
There you go. Right? Come on. Yeah.
But also how you approach it from an academic point of view. So can you dive a little bit deeper into this topic? I know you're just a couple episodes in, but like, what is something that you've already come across while doing this show that you feel that's another layer to this concept that you're just really excited about?
Sure. I mean,
or that fascinates you?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's two. One of them is from an episode I haven't even done yet, so it's just my intuitions, and that would be Black joy and romance. Like, I feel like that's just such an interesting, like, everybody is to some extent interested in that topic, like in romance in general, but then when you look at joy in there, I mean, like, whose joy matters in the relationship, how you actually can find happiness there. I think that's just really interesting, especially in the Black context. I still need to formulate my thoughts a bit more on that, but another topic, or dimension rather, of the Black joy would be this more academic perspective. There was a great master's student I had, she's actually a good friend of mine, Rania Ali. She's fantastic, and she mentioned something really, really interesting about Black joy, that she saw it as a way of de-essentializing herself. So really making herself more human in her academic work. Like, and these might be articles just her professor sees, but that they changed something they were changing something in her. And when she articulated that, I really identified that in myself too, in a lot of projects that I've been doing. So if I can just take a step back with that. So like in, what was it, 2021 or so, I was just biking around town, and this old white woman just like punched me in the arm, and I was like, I didn't like it, like it was not nice, but like afterwards I really started thinking, and I realized how deeply angry I was about certain things I felt like I couldn't talk about, and particularly with respect to race. So then once I really started thinking about it, really started talking and reading and doing this academic work, it felt like, okay, this is another side of my humanity that I just, not that I had been pushing away, but that everything around me had kind of stifled to some extent. That was at least my own experience with that. And it was just going from the anger part of it, of really just feeling all of that, then going from that to the joy. It just feels like you're releasing, like you're letting go of all that stuff, or tearing those things down. And I find that I found it really interesting that even something as simple as writing like this shit down, or talking about it with a friend, or in even some cases just writing like an assignment for school, like how much of a difference that can make when you're putting it in that context. So I hope that was clear, but it better have been clear. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. That's also something that obviously, well, that you experienced, and that caused you to think about this even more. I like though that the title of your show is Radiant Resistance. It sounds like something, like two words you wouldn't put together that much, and maybe even so, that's why I think the concept of Black joy fascinates me personally as well, because I can see how it is a form of resistance, but in a tradition that, you know, goes back probably to MLK and way before,
back.
Obviously, way back.
Yeah.
But I can see these sort of movements that it's not only anger, it's not only sort of this, and obviously it's fueled by that in a way, and rightfully so. But it really is about celebrating. So yeah, as you said, the music, the shared cultural, cultural things, elements from film to music to art, and I think as a concept, I can imagine a lot with it already, which I think is really cool. You visited the US almost every summer.
Yeah.
I read some of your articles in Medium, which were also visiting, as you said, the Deep South and all these places that have obviously layers and layers of history, even in a relatively short time frame like the US has in terms of a history. You're also now starting on this project called the New Anthology, which is all about connecting Dutch and US or Dutch American colonial histories. So how does your experience of going there, visiting, writing about it, reading about it, wanting to go there, how does that come, like, how do you take that along now in the Netherlands, especially given the context of the new anthology? Maybe you can talk a bit about the project, but also mostly about your own thoughts and own experience with it.
Oh, with the TNA, with the new anthology, or with
Dutch American histories, European American histories.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll start with that trip then, because that was really cool. Went there with my mom and my grandma to promote. Like she's doing her work there at the Espresso Talk Today podcast. So check out her show. But went there to promote her stuff at this HBCU football game. Those of you who don't know, that's historically black university in the U.S. So traveled, landed in Atlanta, explored the city, which was very empty. Like I expected a lot more going on. Then we went to Montgomery, Alabama, and once again, very empty. And yeah, it's a very important place to visit. Like I won't speak too much about it, but it's a very important place to go to. But yeah, the bridge at Selma, like there's so much history there. And it's sad to see that this place isn't really taken care of by, it just seems like it's been sort of neglected by the government, and the officials don't seem to be connecting with the people. That's just my perception as an outsider. But in either case, when it comes to those shared colonial histories between the Netherlands or Europe in general and the US, I don't know, I get the sense that whenever I talk about racism here, for example, they'll be like, oh, that's an American thing. And we don't do that here. And then I'd be like, well, what about Zwarte Piet? And they're like, oh, I mean, I get the sense that conversation is changing, but still, it seems it's still there, right? And they'll be like, oh, that's just an American thing. And then parts of the US, they'll be like, oh, that's just a Southerner thing, like as in Southerners in south of the US. And so you keep seeing people like pushing off responsibility, and it's like, it's them. It keeps saying that's them, and then you don't see how you're doing it yourself. So when you define those things like racism or sexism or homophobia or anything like that within like people calling someone something, you're missing, I feel like you're missing the point. And what's really cool, I think, about things like the new anthology is that it isn't even really about concretely going through, so this country did this and this did this. Like, it's not about, as one person we recently spoke to said, it's not about like demonizing the story of any country, but it's about sharing the stories about people who were impacted by this. And that's what really seemed cool to me about this. I mean, like we've kind of been talking about that, like stories are really important. It's also really interesting because you can learn so much. Like you learn more about the human side of it, but you can also see so much politics embedded in those human experiences. So,
and I think it's helping to show that there's way more stories out there than we think, and that's obviously way more layered in all these histories than we think, and also showing, yeah, I hope sparking a lot of people to dive a little bit deeper.
I hope so too, yo. Like, I really hope so too, because it shouldn't take. I mean, my mom was really into African American history, and I learned a lot, but I feel when we talk about those things, at least from my tradition, I should have heard about people like Anton de Kom. I should have heard about people like him and how his brilliant book, like We Slaves of Suriname, where he talks about exactly what happened and describing the stories of his people. When we forget about countries like Aruba or Curacao I'm not Dutch, so maybe it's different, but how it seems like that isn't something that's really on the radar. Like, when you look at these huge houses sometimes, you're wondering, it's like, yo, where'd that come from?
Yeah,
right?
Amsterdam and the museums. I mean, they're all financed from that in a way, yeah. And especially stories like Anton de Kom, which are luckily in that sense, not luckily, finally and rightfully gaining more attention, garnering more attention. I just heard this podcast that for the first time ever, the Dutch opera house or symphony is playing this Surinamese composer that's very well known in Suriname, but it was always a bit lost in between worlds. Also on a musical level, on a art level, I think there's a lot happening, and I hope with the new anthology that we can show that a bit. And I would love, in order to make it a bit of a rounded story, that if you're working on it and we're gonna do a lot more projects around it, that you can bring a little bit of the Black joy concept into it as well, because I think you're probably gonna talk to a lot of people that have these interesting stories to share. So if we can do that in a way, I think the new anthology can be very powerful as a collection of stories, as a curated collection of stories. And I think I'm really really excited about what you're doing and how you're going about it with so much energy at age 22. It's impressive, man.
I mean, thanks. Like, it might seem like a lot of energy, but it's not perfect. Like, you're still trying to figure things out. Like, sometimes I just wake up like, yo, what am I doing? Like, I'm just trying to figure things out and do things that seem important to me and to other people. But I just think the new anthology looks like such a cool project, and really excited to see where it goes. Hopefully there'll be room for joy in that too. So yeah. No, anytime.
Thanks for this conversation. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate that. For real.